Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. This is the second part of a two-part episode of our conversation with Spike Cohen, the 2020 vice-presidential nominee from the Libertarian Party. To hear the first part of the conversation, check out episode 370. For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers. I want to go back to James' original question, because I'm not satisfied. I get what you're saying, and it was news to me, this business about ballot access. But in my opinion, the Libertarians have a bigger problem, that even if they did have ballot access, they still wouldn't garner a decent number of votes. It seems to be that they're so attuned to getting their arguments right.
Yes.
That they're not interested, or it's somewhere further down the list, the idea of capturing the hearts of the 40% of Americans that don't identify with either party. Yep. And it just baffles me. Any company that moved into a market in which 40% of the customers didn't like either of the major brands, that company would take over, right?
Yes.
And here's the Libertarians. It's being handed to them on a silver platter, and they can't close the deal.
Yeah, so Libertarians, and it's one of those chicken versus egg things where you're not sure if it started because the people that were, kind of forging American libertarianism tended to be much more cerebral than they were in touch with like other people's or even their own feelings and social cues and things like that, or if the fact that we are so driven, and so because it was started by people like that, that's how they message, and it's just this sort of momentum thing, or if it's that because our philosophy or our ideology is so heavily focused on a very specific and precise philosophy that it tends to attract people like that and then create momentum. But whatever it is, here we are. I like to say, libertarians tend to think that we can craft the perfect argument, just something on any subject, healthcare, housing, foreign policy, immigration, taxes, whatever, create this perfect, infallible argument. And that the average American or average person will look at this and say, my God, this thing it's perfect. There's nowhere I can attack this. I have no valid argument. I have no valid reason to reject this argument unless I were to engage in some kind of cognitive dissonance or logical fallacy. And I'd never do that, of course. Honey, we're now libertarian. And of course, that's not how it works. Like, we even aren't 100% like that. Everyone has emotional cues. Everyone has social cues. Everyone has, fears and hopes and dreams and whatever. We have to address that. I get asked a lot by libertarians, especially new libertarians, and they're like, well, what libertarian books should I be reading? And I'm like, if you're asking me that, there's a good chance you probably are good on the fundamentals of libertarianism. I mean, you've probably already read economics in one lesson, or the law, or, man, economy and state, or, whatever. Like, you've probably done all these things. At this point, I'm going to recommend to you How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie, because if you're trying to spread libertarianism, you need to understand that you need to primarily be focused on what people are concerned about and how you can provide them with solutions, not what you want to tell them. And maybe that's what it is that a lot of economically illiterate philosophies are so heavily front-loaded on scamming people into thinking that they care about them, that it's just better marketing, like built in.
Well, I think it goes beyond that, right? I frequently tell people that economists and philosophers don't win elections. Storytellers do.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't have the ability to tell a compelling story, people will not listen to you.
Yep.
And when you get into libertarian circles and the first, second, third, fourth thing you encounter are ideological purity tests, here's your problem.
Yeah.
And I do think we've got a chicken egg problem. And I say I kind of throw myself into the libertarian group, although I refer to myself as a classical liberal as a point of distinction. I don't want to be thought of as a libertarian. I don't want to.
As a form of self-protection.
Right. There's too much baggage that comes with the term.
Yes.
And yet,
I think from a policy perspective, there's literally no difference between you and me, literally none.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. But I do think we've got a chicken egg thing that Ant and I tend not to think about. We always say that the Libertarian Party will do a lot better once the Libertarian Party takes itself seriously. What do we mean by this? Well, you take a look at some of the people who make their way to the stage. And okay, if Vermin Supreme is on the stage, you are not taking yourself seriously. Vermin's a nice guy. I've met him. I like him. This is not a serious candidate. And then you take a step back and you say, and how many of the rest of you are? And, it's a bunch of whack jobs and conspiracy theorists who will never prevail upon their fellow Americans to vote for them.
Yeah.
Ever. Most of their fellow Americans don't want to live next door to them. And that's a real problem. And yet, if the libertarians were able to crack this cartel, I think that would be washed away and it would be replaced by much more serious people.
Yeah.
There are serious people in the mix. They're just overpowered by the nonsense.
Right. So a very interesting thing you mentioned, Vermin Supreme. Vermin actually is a storyteller and is using that whole brand of satire to make a greater point. For example, like when he talks about free ponies, he's like, I could be offering you free healthcare. It's the same thing. Like, I'm offering you a fantasy and this is just one that's not harmful to you. Or, wearing the boot on his head, he's like, I'm assigning importance to this pageantry that shouldn't matter at all. And things like that. When he was running for the nomination, he said, I get if you don't want a clown as the nominee. I'm just providing an alternative to that. But getting back to your point with the Libertarian Party, I think that there is this endless argument. And we're seeing it now with the factional wars. Right now, it's between the Mises Caucus and the Classical Liberal Caucus. Before that, it was between the Mises Caucus.
Can you explain to our listeners what that means?
Yeah, so I can do that. But first, I want to kind of give the brief history of what it's been and tie it back to your question. So right now, it's between the Mises Caucus and the Classical Liberal Caucus. Before that, it was between the Mises Caucus and the Pragmatist Caucus. Before that, it was between the Pragmatist Caucus and the Radical Caucus. Before that, it was between the Rothbard Caucus and it might have still been the Pragmatists. This has been going on since the party was founded. And broadly speaking, what it is you have the so-called pragmatists versus the so-called radicals, both of whom to some extent are presenting what I would argue is a false binary choice. One is saying we need to focus on electability and relatability above all things. And then the other one saying we need to focus on bold, principled messaging and purity in what it is we're presenting above all things. And I definitely, in my belief, definitely align more with the radical end. I'm a Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist. But that's a false binary choice because in order to be relatable and therefore electable, you need to be a stark difference from the status quo, and you need to be reaching them on a way that connects with them on a personal level and showing that you care about them. You can't just say, I'm 20% better than the Democrats and the Republicans, and I want to make these marginal changes. Oh, also, I have very little chance of winning. Now, who wants to join me on this mission? At the same time, to speak to the radical side, if you just present how principled you are, and aren't also giving a viable strategy to get from our current status quo to where we should go and reach people on a personal level and show them how these act as solutions to the problems that they're facing, you're just going to look like you're insane to the average person. And that's going to frustrate you. It's going to make you call them idiots, and it's just going to drive the divide. You're going to think they're idiots. They're going to think you're crazy. So I think that both, because they're so in opposition to one another, they often will just move more into their camp of, no, it's all about electability. No, it's all about purity. And it's like, no, guys, you can't do one without the other. And both of you need to be adding the aspect of, we have to be doing this to serve others, not just as a shtick. We shouldn't just be pretending that we're doing it to serve others. We should actually be doing it to serve others, which will inform how we do everything. We'll be listening a lot more. We'll be presenting this as how much we care about people and how much we want them to do better a lot more, instead of just focusing on the principle. Get them bought into that we care about them and that we have solutions and understand how to fix this. And then for those who actually care about the principle behind it, now you can tell them the principle behind it. Most of them will never care about that. They just want to know, do you care about me? Do I have any reason to think I should trust you? And does this solution make any sense to me? But you have to answer it in that order.
I've got to ask you here, because clearly You understand what the libertarians do right. You understand what they do wrong.
Yeah.
You're intelligent. You give a compelling story. And it's clear to me you care. Why in God's name are you not running?
So I will preface this by saying I have not ruled it out. I know the timeline here. I need to be making a decision very, very soon. And I will be one way or another. And I'm not going to be coy about it. I'm either going to say I'm running or I'm going to say I'm not running. What I will also say is it is nothing I have ever wanted to do. When I ran for the VP nomination, I wasn't even expecting to get that. You mentioned Vermin Supreme. I ran as Vermin Supreme's proposed running mate in 2020 during the selection process. That's how much I didn't think I was going to get it, is my running mate had a boot on his head. I was using it to say, okay, all right, yeah, you were paying attention to that. Now let me tell you why. And I even did some of my own shtick, funny stuff. Now that I have your attention, let me tell you what I think we could be doing differently. And basically saying all the stuff I'm saying right now and talking about from what I learned from decades of running multiple businesses and learning how sales and networking works and all of that. Here's what we should be doing. I apparently made a very compelling argument because they picked me as the VP, but I've never sought this. Like I've never sought being the nominee for anything or the candidate for anything. So that has been probably the biggest thing that has kept me from announcing earlier or deciding to announce earlier, is that I don't want to do it. The other thing is that I have, in the wake of the 2020 election, I started my nonprofit, You Are the Power, and we are effectively finding people who are being abused by their local governments, organizing our network of thousands of libertarian activists across the country and the local communities that are being affected by whatever this instance of abuse is. And we fight until we actually get results and we win on it. We've already helped in dozens of cases across the country. On one hand, I'm watching that grow and I'm watching there be so little drama because we're not focused on who's the chair of the local whatever. We're just focusing on attaining and getting results and bringing people into the movement. We're not arguing with people about libertarian policy. The word libertarian or liberty isn't even on this. We're focusing on solutions, an underlining principle of respecting people as individual human beings. That's libertarianism, but we say that later. I do that on one hand, and then I look at the Libertarian Party, and if I even mention Libertarian Party politics, I got other libertarians either saying, yeah, Spike's great and these other people suck, which is not what I want them to say, or I have people arguing with me about why I'm wrong or whatever, and I think, you're all the same people who are over here with me doing incredible things and helping people, but as soon as it becomes about the party and about politics, we're back to fighting each other and arguing amongst each other. What I'm trying to do over here, I'm applying it here, something's getting lost. And so I will tell you, I don't want to do it. If I do it, it's because in these next few days and weeks, I determined that this is the best use of my time to help the liberty movement. I wish that there was more of a consensus around the existing candidates. I would be able to just, say, okay, great, that person has it and I can go do what I'm doing. Honestly, it's the only reason that I'm even considering doing it. There are many compelling arguments to be made about why I should do it, but it's nothing I've really ever craved or desired. And I'm doing some really incredible work right now with You Are the Power. It will come down to, and I'm much closer to answering that than I was when I was saying this a month or two ago. But it really does still come down to the broader question of, is the best use of my time to continue doubling and tripling down on You Are the Power and continuing to expand and grow the way that we are? Or is it best to say, okay, for the next basically 8 months, keep my really good team in place, say, here's our trajectory, keep going here, and then do this sort of side quest of running and using that as a way not just to help the Libertarian Party and to bring people into the movement. To be clear, that's what that run is for. We're not going to win in this cycle. I mean, there's nothing legally stopping us. The odds are basically nil. So it's about growing the movement. It's about bringing people in. It's about basically making contacts with people and then expanding on that. And then also using what I've done there to help You Are the Power. Which of those is the better path to do? I'm determining that right now. But I'll tell you, if it came down to, do you want to do it? I don't want to do it. I do not like arguing with libertarians. I like accomplishing things.
To realize the fact that you don't want to do it recommends you.
Yeah. And then people go, George Washington. I'm like, yeah, no, sure. Thanks. Every time I say I don't want to do it, it's like that Life of Brian scene where he's telling him to go away. And they're like, we love you. It's like the more he tells them to go away, the more they're like, yes,
right,
you have.
Right.
And I wouldn't say people are following me like I'm Jesus, but I will certainly say that the fact that I don't want to do it it's like they think I'm playing hard to get, and I'm like, no, I'm legitimately hard to get. Like I know,
and that makes it even more compelling.
And they're like, but that we want you more. I'm like, no, but I don't want to. So I should fake it, be like, I really want this. I need, come on, everyone, let's do it. Maybe they'd back off if I did that.
I want to stick with that same movie for a second, because arguing with libertarians has always seemed to me to be the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front.
Yes.
Right down to the marrow. They believe all the same things, and they still manage to find a way to cancel each other out.
It's a form of nesting. It's a coping mechanism. If you know acutely how bad things are, you're not just like the average normie out here who's like, man, the price of things is really high. And, I'm kind of worried about crime. Like, we know what's coming. We know the giant debt bomb and the unfunded liabilities and mandates that are like, we know how bad things are going to get if things don't change, and we're watching it not only continue, but actually accelerate. We know how bad things are going to get. And it reaches a point where we feel powerless, and we're like, well, there's nothing I can do. We run for president and get 1%, 3%, 0.25%. There's nothing we can do about this thing that was completely out of our control. But what I can control is who's in charge of my state affiliate, or who is the spokesperson, who's the person running the party's Twitter account, or, who my favorite libertarian influencers are and who my least favorite ones are. I can control that. And so I think it becomes a lot of like redirection of frustration. It's like you kick the dog. Well, we're each other's dogs, and we're just kicking each other constantly. A big part of what I'm doing with You Are the Power is saying you're actually not powerless. Yeah, we might not be able to end the Fed tomorrow, but there are people right now in your backyard whose lives are being ruined by a government that we can cyberbully into doing the right thing. And we can do it over and over and over again, very often from the comfort of our computers and mobile devices, not even leaving our couches. And we can do this over and over and over again, and we can build momentum and bring more people into the movement to join us in doing this. And along the way, exposing them to the core reason why this happened in the first place, that these officials are not being expected, because they're the government, they're not being expected to respect people as individual human beings like we literally expect from anyone else who's not in the government. And by doing that, I'm kind of redirecting a lot of that frustration. But then I watch as those exact same people bring them back over here, and they go back to doing the thing. I think that's also because we use the democratic process to choose all these different races. Yeah, we can't win the presidential election. We can't win the gubernatorial election or the congressional election or the Senate election. It's this very tough road to hoe, because what would help alleviate or give them something to do or to fight for requires us to be bigger and to have more victories. But in order to have more victories, we have to stop fighting each other so much. We've been growing steadily in many ways, but then we'll have these moments where we kind of fall apart because we fall too much into fighting each other and saying, oh, this side is why everything's falling apart, or no, this side is why everything's falling apart. And there are many different aspects of what I'm trying to do with You Are the Power. Keeping in mind, You Are the Power is a nonpartisan nonprofit. We work with everyone. We're not tied to any particular political party. What I'm hoping to do for the libertarian movement is provide a path forward, give them something useful that they can do. They can do other useful things too. If they want to help people now, and they want to grow the liberty movement, and they want to get people intrinsically understanding our ideas, including people who are not philosophically minded, get them to understand it on like a base gut level, instead of as this like, yes, I agree with the subjective theory of value and the non-aggression principle. It's like, no, I agree that we should expect respect from government officials just like we do from our loved ones and our neighbors and strangers. That's something that a 7-year-old could get behind. Like, they could understand that. And so I'm trying to give them something useful to do and show them like, actually, we can work together, and not only work together with other libertarians, but people that don't even necessarily agree with us, like people that maybe haven't even heard of libertarianism yet. Right. And yet we're turning them into liberty advocates. They don't even necessarily realize that's what they are yet. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I want to get to the party one more time, and then I want to get to You Are the Power. But I want to throw in as an aside that the cause of liberty should not be a partisan cause.
Right. Yes.
Democrats, Republicans, everybody should give a shit about freedom.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're the problem. Let me get off my soapbox now that I've crawled so far up there. I want to make the case that the Libertarian Party, as such, needs its Reagan. We need that unifying force that will come in and be persuasive to many people. I'm not saying somebody who will win an election with 49 to 50 states.
Someone who will unite the clans. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly so. And the Libertarians are so bad at seeing how they're played, right? So they'll fall for somebody like Bob Barr.
Yeah.
Barr, the representative, once upon a time, who not a libertarian at all, but who kind of comes in and says, hey, I'm good enough, vote for me. And then they'll look at Justin Amash and say, well, you're not libertarian enough.
This is that Prague versus radical thing. What you just provided is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. So the Prags were in charge. They took over and did the, I forget what they call it, the Portland massacre, where they basically gutted our platform to make it much more palatable to like moderate Republicans, basically. And they said, we know how we're going to start getting more votes and ballot access and all that stuff. We're going to find like failed Republicans or retiring Republicans, and we're going to run them. And so we pushed up the date for our selection to Memorial Day, which is the end of May of the election year that we pick our nominee, which gives any of the Republican candidates who are running from the Republican Party for president time to fail and then say, okay, I'll run as a libertarian, then basically get their leftovers. You know, we'll start getting more votes. It will really take off. And we might have even gotten more votes with Bob Barr, and we certainly did with Gary, who actually, to his defense, is a libertarian. He's more of a constitutionalist, I guess, moderate libertarian, but he's a libertarian. But the problem with that strategy was, yeah, it got us more votes, but it didn't get people that joined the party and stayed in and were excited about the principles behind it. They voted, they might have donated, some of them stuck around, but broadly speaking, it didn't translate into the same amount of visceral ongoing support for the party that, for example, a Harry Brown did or a Ron Paul did when he ran in the 80s. And so then what happened was you had this sort of court overcorrection where then the radicals are in charge and they go, yeah, we're never doing Bill Weld. We're never doing Bob Barr again. And then they look at Justin Amash, who's a constitutionalist who, you know, was a Republican and then decided he couldn't square that circle anymore, staying in the Republican Party, and went, nope, not pure enough. And so it's like, that's the perfect example of the false dilemma I'm talking about here. A Libertarian Party that nominates a Bob Barr or an RFK Jr. that does that, well, what's the point of it? But then a Libertarian Party that then turns around and looks at an actual libertarian and goes, yeah, you know, you're a little moderate for us. What good is that? There has to be a recognition that, yes, there needs to be professionalism and electability and all of that stuff, but there needs to be at least some extent of this person's an actual libertarian, or else it's all for naught. I mean, if we're just going the electability route, let's nominate Trump. He's the most likely person to win right now. You do have to have that balance. And I think that's been a big problem, is because we're constantly fighting each other, we don't have balance. We have seesaw. It is an ongoing problem.
All right. So now I want to talk about You Are the Power
Sure.
more thematically than we have to this point. I'll start you off with what it might have been like to be my student, for those of you who are out there, because I remember a girl came to my office one day and she said, I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. And I said, well, yes, you're on the horns of a dilemma there. And she said, I really want to help people. And I said, oh, become a prostitute. And she said, no, that's not what I mean. And I said, oh, well, become a nurse. And she said, nope, that's not what I mean. And I said, oh, start a business and give people jobs. And she said, nope, that's not what I mean. And it turns out what she really meant was she wanted to join the government and at the point of a gun force people to accept the kind of help she wanted to dole out.
Help people. She said she wanted to help
right,
people. Of course, that's what she meant. She wanted to join the mob. Yeah.
And I want to know what your thought process was when you thought, I could probably do some good in the world. And then you went and did it.
Yeah. So I have since, I'll go really far back if you want me to. I had been a small business owner and entrepreneur since I was 16 years old, just before my 17th birthday. And I was very, very successful at that. And I'm not a billionaire or anything like that, but I'm okay. I did good. As I got into my early 30s, I felt empty. Like I had, on paper, everything was great, successful, beautiful, incredible wife. Don't have any active disputes with my family. Like on paper, everything's looking great. But inside, I just felt completely unfulfilled. I felt like, I remember seeing this image. It was like a meme, a drawing of a guy who was running around his head and a stick there, and a dollar bill was hanging. And it's just out of his reach. And he's running, chasing it. And he's about to run into a grave with his name on it. And I thought, yeah, that's me. And I was like, I'm literally just chasing paper that at this point I don't really need until I'm dead. And I didn't feel any purpose. And then in 2014, I woke up, the right side of my body was going numb. Fast forward over the course of 2 years and multiple tests, we figure out I have MS. At this point now, all I'm doing is fighting MS. Sold my company, I retired. I'm now just fighting MS. I'm going to fight MS. And so my whole personality became, I'm fighting MS, I'm fighting MS. And along the way, I learned about different ways of battling stress and things like that to keep my relapses from, feeling as intense and my symptoms from going down. And I came across purposeful living. And the first few times I'm like, yeah, purposeful living, but what should I be eating? What should I be doing? What supplements should I be taking? It kept coming up, purposeful living. And I'm like, all right, fine. Let me figure out what I'm doing here. And I did some very useful stuff to say, okay, what do I want my purpose to be? So at the age of, what was I at this point? 17, 35. I figured out what that teenage or early 20s girl did. I want to help people. I'm at a point now where I can just focus on helping people. How can I help people? Well, I'm pretty good at explaining what's wrong and how we can fix it. I've just been ranting it to my loved ones. Let me now, do something. So I started my podcast. That was pretty successful, led to me running for the nomination. I'm now running for vice president. And so along the way, as I'm running for vice president, I kept noticing that there were a few things that were happening. I was watching all this infighting, but everyone was kind of holding it together because we got this thing we're doing and it's time sensitive. And I'm like, okay, great. We give people a goal that has an attainable thing. And the attainable thing, if you're in a Libertarian presidential campaign, is survive the campaign and make sure all the events happen right. Okay, so we're all working together there. And even though all the planning's being done at the top, it's really the locals that are figuring things out when the rubber meets the road at these events. Okay, some decentralized, spontaneous order stuff. Okay. But then what happened was more and more of the people that were coming to my events, my campaign events, were talking to me about local things that were happening, about how their lives were being destroyed by an out of control city council that was trying to take their business or their home or whatever. A lot of people whose lives were being destroyed because they had violated some lockdown restriction or whatever. But it was the local and county and local governments doing this stuff. And I kept saying, listen, I'm running for vice president. We're focusing on federal stuff. Let me see if I can find a libertarian in your area that can help you. And I started building up this network of libertarians across the country who would try to help these folks and get justice for them. And we had a fairly reasonable success rate, considering it was entirely ad hoc in the midst of a vice presidential campaign. And those people stayed motivated. They didn't peel off like a lot of the other volunteers did when the campaign was over. And I thought, all right, so we need something to do. We need something to unify around. There are people that need help right now. This is actually a good way to try to demonstrate libertarianism instead of explaining it or arguing it. Maybe there's something here. And so in 21, as a proof of concept with some of those volunteers, we started taking on some causes and seeing what kind of traction we could get. We did incredible, 70% success rate, no budget to speak of. And so going into 22, we actually became a formal organization, a nonprofit, and have been doing it ever since. And what all of that boiled down to was I saw in the market, if you will, an opening of there were people that are being destroyed by their local governments. No one even knows or cares. Even in their backyard, they don't know or care. And certainly the public at large doesn't know. There are a bunch of libertarians who get it in terms of what needs to be done, but have absolutely no clue how to get there or even how to talk to other people about it. You've got a bunch of people out there who are wildly frustrated with the status quo, but they don't know how to do anything about it. And all of these people feel powerless. What can we do? We can remind them that you are the power. We can work together and we can actually get results. And that the core of what we're doing is we're demanding the respect that we should have gotten from the beginning. And that's what You Are the Power is. That's what it turned into. I know that was a very long explanation for what we do, but it was necessary to explain how I got here.
Practically speaking, so you said earlier that you cyberbully the government. Practically speaking, what do you do?
Yeah. So first we find a cause. And by that, at this point, we're basically drinking from a fire hose. We used to have to try to look for causes. Now we're getting constant emails and messages of people that are, telling me about something that's happening to them or to someone they know or something they heard about. So now what we do is we find out about those causes and we vet them heavily. Is this true? Is this actually happening the way that they're saying? Or are they leaving out a lot of stuff or just straight up lying? And a good percentage of the time turns out it was a lie, or they left out quite a bit that made them a lot less sympathetic than they were trying to present. And then if it is true, is this something we can build a movement around? Is this going to tug at people's heartstrings? If you got wrongfully pulled over for speeding and you weren't really speeding, yeah, you should probably fight that in court, but I can't build a movement around justice for the guy who got a 15 over ticket. But if your family's being destroyed or your business is being destroyed or they're trying to, take your home from you or something like that, well, yeah, now we can build a movement around that. And then from there, we work with our regional organizers and state organizers and the locals on the ground that are as close to that area as possible and come up with a game plan. The game plan initially consists of reaching out to those local officials and saying, hi, we're with you, we're the power. We found out about this. Stop doing it. I mean, we say it a little bit nicer than that, but we do that. And we're finding more and more now that the organization's been around and they can check out what we've done. That's actually working more and more. So many of our causes, no one ever finds out about. I'll just tweet or post, hey, we just helped this family with it, but I don't give details because it's all taken care of. If that doesn't work, then we go on to the next step, which is letting the public know about it and putting out content that often goes viral. We get millions of views. Thousands of people are now emailing or text messaging or calling or filling up the mentions on social media of these local officials who are usually used to absolutely no one paying attention to them. These are people that show up to work, their council meetings, they're drinking coffee to stay awake. No one's there except the person begging them not to destroy their life. That's what they're used to. Now thousands of people are going after them. And that usually works. If the other thing didn't work, that works. And if that doesn't work, then we start showing up to their city council meetings. We start organizing the locals to show up to the meetings, because if the thousands of angry but firm and respectful messages and emails and calls and all of that, if that wasn't enough, now a few dozen or a couple hundred people show up to your city council meeting where it's standing room only and they're all saying the same thing over and over again to you, that will work. So at this point, it's become a science that we have it down to where we always win. While we're doing that, all of our reinforcing messaging, all of our content that we put out about the cause, all of the messages that we encourage people through our templates that we set up for them to send, that they send out to these officials, everything that we are saying when we show up at the meetings, if we have to, all of those things all go back to the same thing. This wouldn't have happened if you had respected these people or this person or this business or whatever as individual human beings the same way that you would if you were operating outside of your capacity as a government official. You would have never gone up to someone and pointed a gun at them and said, give me your house. But because you were in a government position, you did essentially that. And if you had shown that same level of individual human respect, you wouldn't have done that. And we're reinforcing that to those officials, but more importantly, we're reinforcing it to the public that they need to expect that level of individual human respect. We gamify the process. All right, here's the next cause. Come join us on this. Here's the next cause. Come join us on this. And here are the updates on the victories. And here's some photos of this family who was, being kicked out of their house. Now they're back in it. And look, they got a dog. Like, we keep them updated on here's the consequence of the good that you did. Also, here's the next cause you can work on. And by the way, none of this would be happening if they were respecting you as an individual. And we drive it home over and over and over again. And you have people that are becoming effective liberty activists. They may not have even heard the term libertarian yet.
God, this is great. I love this.
I have two questions to send you on your way, Spike. First, how can people learn more about You Are the Power? And second, what could they do conceivably to be involved with you?
Absolutely. So both have the same answer. If you go to youarethepower.net, and also if you go to my social media, if you look for Spike Cohen, you'll find me everywhere. But I do a mix of You Are the Power stuff and general politics stuff and goofy memes and whatever. If you want to focus on what we're doing with You Are the Power, and you don't want to see my goofy memes too, if you look for @YATP, like You Are the Power official, @YATP official, we are on Facebook. We are on X, I keep calling it Twitter. We're on Instagram, And we recently started a TikTok channel. We're trying to get the Chinese government on board with us too. And so we're on those 4 platforms. We're also on youarethepower.net. So the first thing you can do if you want to help is go to youarethepower.net and get involved. Here are the things that we need. If you can give, if you're able to donate, you can go to the website and make a donation. Our causes require a lot of man hours, and the bulk of our work is done by unpaid volunteers. But there are certain things that require people who are working essentially full time, vetting these causes, organizing the teams and all of that. So any amount that you can give, we're that much closer to helping many more people. If you want to get involved as an activist as well, you can become a member by going to youarethepower.net. It's all in the same place. We have both free memberships. You can just become a member and be a part of it. We also have paid memberships that come with some additional swags and perks, but all members are members. If you are a member, we don't have tiers of membership in terms of importance. Our most important members are the ones who are doing the most work. If you're able to give, it helps us with the cost of running the organization. And obviously, you get some cool You Are the Power swag as well. So you can do that, join and become a member. And then the next thing you can do is lead. Whether you join You Are the Power or not, it's easier if you join the You Are the Power, but whether you join You Are the Power or not, you can become a leader in your local community. And the first thing that you can do that, start showing up to your local government meetings, school board meetings, zoning board meetings, city council meetings, county council meetings, whatever. Be prepared to be bored a lot at first, because what you're going to see is just, you talk about the banality of evil. You're going to see people in there just barely staying awake. They don't go in there and go, what horrors can we inflict upon our populace? Like they literally come in and like, hey, Bob, hey, Steve, hey, whatever. And, are barely staying awake because it's so mundane, largely what they're doing. As you get more familiar with what they're doing, you will watch that they are screwing you over and everyone else. What will inevitably happen is someone else will show up. Sometimes multiple people will show up for public comment, and they will basically be there begging those people to stop ruining their life. It could be an instance of a wrongful arrest, body cam footage from a brutality incident not being released, eminent domain abuse. They're trying to seize their home or their business. CPS abuse. Child had a chronic health condition and CPS assumed it was abuse and stole their kid and is pressing charges on. It could be a variety of different things that are happening, and they're going to their local government saying, stop doing this, please. And the local government's barely even making eye contact. Again, they're just trying to stay awake. And you've now found a cause. And if you're with You Are the Power, you can bring that cause to us and we'll vet it, make sure it's legit. We'll help you put together what you can do to organize around that to both your local community and our network of thousands of activists across the country, across the planet at this point. And then once we have the cause put together, we'll start doing the work, help signal boost what you're doing down there, and we will fight until we win. That's what we do. So if you want to be a part of this, the first step you can do is go to youarethepower.net today and sign up to become a member.
Spike Cohen, thanks for stopping by today. We appreciate it. And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time, be sure to follow us on Twitter. Handles are in the show notes. Join Words and Numbers Backstage, the Facebook group where the conversation continues, and
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Until next week, try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Just one. And who knows, it may turn into a trend. Give it a shot. You might feel good about yourself.
You could say you tried.
You tried, that's right. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.